Have you all heard about the crosswalk? So this is a document that has been released jointly about the BRE and WELL that clearly lays out where the two schemes overlap, so that you don't need as many people like me, consultants, to do double modeling, double assessments. It's incredibly useful because there's a lot of joined up environmental and health and well-being issues like thermal comfort. So it's all available online. Alan Yates is here from the BRE as well, and it means that in theory we can focus on outcomes as opposed to tedious credit details. Yep.
Yeah, so
and
the document is downloadable from the BRE website free of charge. So
yeah.
Let's go to the resources bit.
Great, thank you. I always feel like I should walk on juggling or something when someone mentions a double act, but leave that for another time. Julie and I have just been asked to talk about our experience of some of the work we're doing at British Land, and in particular our head office. Just to set the context, I think probably most people have heard of British Land, but our corporate strategy is all around creating places people prefer. So that's a recognition of the fact that the way people live, shop and work is changing and boundaries are blurring. And how does a landlord respond to that and make sure that physical space is still successful and relevant? So that's all about creating the right experience, and a core part of that is well-being in the built environment. I'm going to echo a lot of what Paul has just said, but place and space really impacts on how people think, feel, behave and interact. And for us, we're about 50% offices and 50% retail parks, and increasingly looking at residential. So it's not just commercial offices for us, but right across our asset portfolio. And we've done a lot of work about thinking about that. Now, our role as a landlord is quite interesting because we don't always get involved in the fit-outs of our occupiers. So what's our role in bringing around well-being? So we've developed a set of well-being principles that are informing our approach to placemaking. So how do you make places and spaces healthy? So that's everything from public realm, streetscape, those kind of things, all the way through to how do you make them places of delight? So how do you create an experience that people are going to remember? And I think that the point to mention there, and that's relevant to this topic, is that it's not just through design, but there's a lot you can do through both operation of site, so customer service, for example. All of our retail sites have been through dementia-friendly training, so we know how to cope with people in that segment of society. But also community engagement is also really important. But if I come on to think about commercial office space, and we're applying the WELL standard to a number of projects at the moment, but probably the one that's most relevant to this talk is the work we've done at York House, our head office over in Marble Arch. Now, I have been speaking about this for a couple of years, so apologies if people have heard some of what I'm going to say already. But we had an opportunity to create a place our own people prefer back in 2014 through a refurbishment we've done. And at the time, it was a bit of a perfect storm because the UK GBC were developing the framework that Paul had up earlier, and so we were allowed to apply, or able to apply, a lot of their thinking, both in terms of the design, but also the monitoring and measuring in our design. And WELL was just, the WELL standard was just starting to emerge in the UK market at that time as well, so we were able to employ a lot of the thinking that was going on there, but we didn't actually go for the WELL standard at that time, so we're probably a couple of years ahead of where we are now in terms of our thinking about that standard. But the central driver for doing this refurbishment was that our people wanted a place they could be proud of. We wanted York House to reflect our brand and almost be an extension of our culture and as a recruitment tool to attract the best talent in the market. So through the design brief, we talked a lot about the well-being of our staff, and we've done all of the things you've already heard, which for me are slight hygiene factors. So on light, all of our internal walls are now made of glass so that much more natural light comes into the space. All of our colour palette was selected for light refracting surfaces even. We put reflective weave into our carpet, kept a constant height of internal furniture so that light was able to penetrate deeper into the floor space. Air quality, for example, lots on measuring, servicing of air handling units, new filters on the air handling units on the roof, We actually now monitor our space on CO2 sensors rather than the old way we used to do it on standard fresh air rates. And we were very peculiar about VOCs, pushing our supply chain very hard with our materials red list during the design as well. Biophilia, we achieved that through our materials selection, natural materials for all of our flooring and even some of our wall tiling, things like that, and a lot of planting. Everyone has their own garden that they're able to personalise at the end of their desk, etc. Active design, centralised welfare, water really visible, and I think we've probably got the best cycling facilities I've seen in London. So we have a towel concierge service, enough showers and lockers for everyone in the building. They're just beautiful facilities. But I think the point I really want to make is the biggest impact on the well-being of our staff has been through what we've called social infrastructure. So work is essentially a social endeavour there's lots of research around that once core needs are met, it's social interaction that is the number one indicator for well-being. And if you often ask people what's the best places they like to work, what creates that place, it's the atmosphere, the buzz, the culture of that organisation. So for me, I think that all of the things we're talking about here around the unseen or the invisible parts of well-being are slight hygiene factors. You expect good air quality, good water, that type of thing, but it's where we've been able to really make a difference is the right mix of isolation and collaboration space, the ability to give people the choice of where and how they want to work. And then if you look at some of the research that's come out of the Stoddart Review recently, that we actually spend about 50% of our time in the office, at our desks, and 50% in social interactions. So the social infrastructure we put in was a nod to wanting to be an open and inclusive, an agile and diverse company, really trying to use our space design to assist with the bringing around of this culture change. So we used there's lots of things we did. I think we've all heard stats or quotes around values on the wall versus values in action, and I think the social infrastructure is really values in action. So we put in a new staircase from our 3rd floor meeting rooms all the way out to the 5th floor, and that's fundamentally changed the way we use the building. People are circulating a lot better. It's the best memory jog you could have as you're passing people on the stairs too. I was supposed to do that last week. We also have a really big social space that we ran a competition for our staff to name. So it's now called The Landing, the British Landing. But that's a really open platform where we all come and eat lunch and have our company meetings and things like that. Artwork, and then the other one is good coffee. That's made such a difference, and it's we got this flashy iPad machine that knows your preferences, and you can order your coffee before you even get there. But I think what it is, it demonstrates to our staff that we care about them, and it's probably working about 50% of the time, but that creates a conversation in itself. It's just a focal point that people gather around, and you have these conversations. How am I doing for time? Right, because I want to get on to Julie, because she's got more of the technical expertise. But just to echo some of Paul's points, that the lessons we've learnt and we're trying to apply in conversations with our occupiers, place is only part of a wellbeing strategy. The policies around health assessments, and really the culture bits is also really important. And I think that doing both at the same time reinforces and make both of them much more successful. Number 2, please collaborate with your landlord. I know Paul mentioned that sometimes adversary, but we are crying out for conversations with occupiers where we can collaborate in this space. What can we do in base build situations? What can they do through the fit out and maintenance of their space? And how do we collaborate on that? 3, there are low-cost interventions, and Paul said it much better than me, but I think water, air, biophilia and active design are ones that we can tick off in any space with minimal investment. And 4, continuous energy. The Stoddart Review also mentioned something really interesting about a zone of toxicity that we're probably coming into now at York House. So after 3 years, it doesn't matter what intervention you've done, but that will start to wane in its impact on your staff. So how do you keep space refreshed and renewed, and how do you keep building on that? It could be as simple as revolving your artwork, or a new coat of paint. We're now looking at rolling out smart technologies and things like that in the building to better communicate how that space is performing in real time. And that's my third final fifth point, actually, technology. Work itself is changing. I think that's a longer term trend. 5-10 years, will offices still be designed the way they are now with automation and things like that? But in the near future, there's been rumours for a long time that the next iPhone or Samsung is coming out with air quality capabilities. I haven't yet seen that, but there's certainly one of the things we're struggling with is the amount of new technology on the market in terms of sensors and how that data is collated and collected and reported back. But it also provides a lot of opportunity for new communication mediums able to demonstrate how space is performing in real time. With that, I think I'll hand over to Julie. I think I was just going to say on WELL standards, the most important standard for us was user satisfaction, and that's been very positive. We used the UK GBC's framework and put together a post-occupancy evaluation. There's been a real increase in perceived sense of well-being, in perceived sense of productivity. People feel much more pride around the space they're operating in, much more likely to bring visitors in and much more likely to collaborate, actually. But most recently, we've been measuring our performance against the WELL standard, undertaking a gap analysis, and that's what I'll pass over.
So the WELL standard, in a way, when you work with a client that has a comprehensive strategy like that, is the small, boring paperwork part of it. However, and I think a lot of consultants have found that as well, there's something extremely interesting in WELL, is that it's performance-based. So it's asking us to know what we've done and to actually do what we said we would do, which is transformative. I don't know how many conferences you've been at in the last 10 years about the performance gap. All of us coming up with ideas about how to address this. In a way, WELL cuts across this because it comes and you have to verify how the building is doing. So obviously with York House, we're starting with expectations that it's probably going to perform quite well because of the health and well-being measures, because of the environmental targets. But the first thing we have done is commission sort of shorter version, what we call pre-audits of an actual WELL performance verification. And what we found, first of all, is that there was data available which wasn't necessarily as accurate as we would have wanted it to be. And that's symbolic of the industry at the moment. As Matt says, there are a lot of sensors at the moment, and it's difficult to cut through what might be cheap and okay and what is actually cheap and doesn't make much sense. So on VOC levels, for example, the first thing we recommend to clients who want to know whether or not they are well ready is some measurements, and also if they applied a BRE assessment in the past, they might have actually already been tested for VOC levels. There's a lot of information that I think the industry has, but that is probably buried somewhere in someone's really useful report that no one ever read. So by all means, go back to your past projects. There's loads to learn. What we have also found, and that's not only at York House, but it's that just by starting the conversation around, for example, CO2 levels, and whether they meet the WELL limit, we can also have very interesting discussion around energy efficiency, to pick up on Rob's point. Because these standards, on some aspects, they're pushing the boundary, like asking us not to have biscuits or bacon patties. But on the M&E aspects, really, they're just reinforcing best practice that has been there for years. So CIBSE and ASHRAE standards, essentially. We're not, in theory, really going to lead to higher energy consumption. We're just checking whether it actually works. We're becoming aware of filters that are probably already installed, but that probably no one knows about. The good thing is at York House they are installed and they're actually well maintained, so they're doing their job and they're not causing inefficiencies. But it's a really, really useful point where by trying to find out about whether we have high particle matters indoors, we're finding out that the filter is clogged and making the whole system work inefficiently. Not in your building. But we're certainly finding a lot of overlaps, and that leads me to again, one of the first things that we recommend to clients, in addition to these short pre-audits, is to talk to their FM teams. I've always wanted to talk to FM teams. We always advocate it, but it never happens. If they're lucky, they get a manual at some point late in the day, while now they're here early in the process telling us what it is that they're doing, what they actually don't know. Broadgate are actually implementing a well-being group. They're getting trained. This is fantastic because it's finally putting them at the center in a high-profile role where they have the power and the skills to do the really difficult job that they have with the complex systems we've put in. I think that's probably my key points, so it depends how long more I have.
2 minutes.
Woo! I'm so surprised, sorry. No, I think I'll end on that because really it's one of the great things about WELL, and it happens to be WELL at the moment, but it could be another standard, is that it's performance-based and we're having the right people in the room. I've never worked so much with interior designers in the last 10 years. So we're talking to people who actually will occupy the buildings and who have an influence on how the building will perform, which is quite a change in our, someone mentioned the way buildings are procured, and how that's the source of all evils, but I would agree. And we're joining up the chain.
Excellent. Thank you very much.